Hello and a very good evening. You're watching the news tonight on Rajya Sabha television with me, Frank Pereira. Here are the headlines. India all set for landmark tax reform. President Pranab Mukherjee to launch the goods and services tax regime at midnight in Central Hall of Parliament in the presence of Vice President Mohammad Hamid Ansari and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Opposition parties including the Congress, Left, Trinamool and the RJD to boycott GST rollout event, but the Janata Dal United, which is supporting the NDA for the presidential polls, will attend it. First proposed in 2003, GST will replace a number of indirect taxes with a unified tax regime. Rajya Sabha TV takes a look at India's journey to a single nationwide tax that will streamline the economy. New Delhi tells Beijing to preserve status quo of Dokhala near Sikkim. China's refusal had made Indian soldiers stop encroachment and construction of a road in the area. An end to the long battle for Mosul in sight just days after freeing the great mosque of Al-Nuri in Mosul. Iraqi security forces press ahead to round up Islamic State fighters bottled up in neighborhoods of the old city. Well, GST will be in place in just a few hours from now. Let's take a look at the latest developments. India will move to a one tax, one nation regime as the ambitious goods and services tax is rolled out at midnight. The event will take place at the Central Hall of Parliament and will be attended by the President, Vice President, Prime Minister and other top dignitaries. Congress and left parties are boycotting the rollout ceremony. However, the opposition is divided with the SP, NCP and JDU attending the event. Here are the details.
The goods and services tax will be officially launched at midnight in the Central Hall of Parliament by President Pranab Mukherjee. Vice President Mohammad Hamid Ansari, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Lok Sabha Speaker Sumitra Mahajan and former Prime Minister H.D. Devegowda are among the top dignitaries attending the event. 2 short films on GST will be screened at the occasion. The hour-long event will begin at 5 minutes to 11 tonight and end at 5 minutes past midnight. Some of the opposition parties, including the Congress, the left parties, Trinamool Congress and the RJD have decided to boycott the midnight event. However, the Janata Dal United, which is supporting the NDA for the presidential polls too, will attend the event. Another opposition party, the NCP, will also be present at the launch. The event will be attended by party chief Sharad Pawar. The BJP, though, has urged the Congress and the left parties to reconsider their decision and not play spoilsport.
It's really unfortunate because they are distancing themselves from the process of reformation in the country. I hope that they will realize by evening and rethink and then join us in the Central Hall.
सरकार का आग्रह करना, हमने तो सरकार के आग्रह को स्वीकार किया था संविधान संशोधन के पक्ष में मत डालकर। संसद ने तो अपना काम खत्म कर दिया, अब क्यों बुला रहे हैं? हमने तो संविधान संशोधन पास किया 3 अगस्त 2016 को और उसके बाद जीएसटी के 3 कानून हमने पारित कर दिए। अब उत्सव हो और परंपराएं तोड़ी जाए, उसके हम भागीदार नहीं हो सकते, उसमें हमारी कोई हिस्सेदारी नहीं होगी।
First proposed in 2003, GST will replace a number of indirect taxes with a unified tax regime. The government promises that the transition to a single nationwide tax will streamline business and boost economy by tearing down barriers between 31 states and union territories. It is also estimated that it will add 0.4% to 2% to GDP growth. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, tonight India will implement the biggest reform in indirect taxation with a single common goods and services tax that will come into effect in 28 states except Jammu and Kashmir. This common tax will subsume most of the indirect taxes on production, sales and supply of goods and services within the country and will cover all the stages of transaction. Rajya Sabha television helps you understand this tax reform.
Despite being a single unified nation, India was divided into multiple tax jurisdictions. It was not a single market for production or the supply of goods and services. India had three statutory authorities: the central government, the state governments, and the local bodies or municipal councils, levying and collecting multiple taxes on the production, sale, and supply of goods and services. For instance, the central government levied excise duty on the production of goods, but it also levied central sales tax on the interstate sale of goods. Also, under the Constitution, the central government was exclusively empowered to levy and collect service tax on the supply of services like telephone and mobile bills, courier and transportation services, finance services, air travel, and dining in restaurants and hotels, among others. State governments, on the other hand, levied VAT, the value-added tax or the sales tax on the sale of products within their states. Finally, municipal councils and local bodies levied entry tax or octroi on the entry of vehicles in their area.
In our country, we have two sort of taxes. One is direct tax, that is income tax. Second is indirect taxes like sales tax, VAT, octroi. Now all the indirect taxes have been clubbed into one tax, which would be called GST from now. Now, how would GST impact us? GST would make life more efficient, more smooth, more fast for a businessman or a person who is trading or manufacturing. Basically, GST would increase the GDP of the country and it would increase growth.
The multiplicity of taxes not only resulted in cascading taxes, but their implementation also became slow and complex. What it did on the ground was to hamper the smooth movement of raw material and finished products across the country, which in turn inhibited the growth of businesses. Krishna Tripathi report for Rajya Sabha Television.
Well, to overcome the problems of multiple authorities and different taxes, the concept of a single common goods and services tax administered jointly by both the states and the centre was mooted in the last decade. The outcome was intended to be one nation, one tax.
The process of having a single unified tax structure, however, was fraught with many challenges as it required changes in the constitution that needed to be approved by two-thirds majority of both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha and subsequently ratified by at least half of the state assemblies. Given the fractured nature of Indian politics, this was considered almost impossible. However, over a decade of efforts by the two UPA governments and the present NDA government eventually bore fruit, and in May 2015, the Lok Sabha passed the Constitutional Amendment Bill, while the Rajya Sabha did so in August 2016. The bill was then retransmitted to Lok Sabha with the amendments made by Rajya Sabha that were approved unanimously by Lok Sabha on 8th August 2016. This has ensured the implementation of the GST in its present form.
ये अगर सक्सेसफुली रोल आउट हो जाता है तो मेरी समझ से ये अपने आप में एक बहुत बड़ा आर्थिक सुधार होगा और इकोनॉमी के लिए बहुत ज़्यादा फ़ायदेमंद होगा और शॉर्ट टर्म में थोड़ी बहुत दिक्कतें ज़रूर आएंगी, पर मीडियम टू लॉन्ग टर्म में ना ये सिर्फ बिज़नेस के लिए बेनिफिशियल है, परंतु कीमतों के हिसाब से भी जो है कंज्यूमर्स के लिए बेनिफिशियल होगा और टैक्स बेस के हिसाब से लिए सरकार के लिए बहुत बेनिफिशियल होगा.
GST will subsume most of the central and state taxes on production and supply of goods and services, including central excise duty, central sales tax, service tax, state sales tax or VAT, commercial tax, advertising tax, entertainment tax, purchase tax, luxury tax, and also entry tax levied by municipalities. Krishna Tripathi's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, in other news now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in Gujarat earlier on Friday, where he addressed the inaugural function of Textiles India 2017. He hailed the industry's high efficiency and its large-scale production capacity. Earlier, he was in Modasa in Aravali district, where he said that he aspires to build a grand monument of Lord Buddha.
Praising the textile industry's high efficiency and its large production capacity, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said it was being infused with the mantras of skill, scale, speed and zero defect and zero effect.
India is today described as the bright spot in the global economy. It has emerged as one of the most attractive global investment destinations. This has been made possible by a series of sustained policy initiatives.
The Prime Minister added that the textile industry is the second largest employer in the country after agriculture. He also urged manufacturers to catalogue and map clothing diversity to earmark strengths and specialties of each state or region.
I hope this event will help familiarize global and Indian leaders with India's enabling policy environment, strengths and vast opportunities associated with the sector.
Earlier, the Prime Minister was in Gujarat's Aravali district where Buddhist relics were recently found during an excavation. He said that he aspires to build a grand monument of Lord Buddha there. He also said the excavations have established that Lord Buddha was also revered in the western belt of India. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, India on Friday told China that it needs to establish the pre-June 16, 2017 status quo at the Dokala near Sikkim. Beijing, however, continues to insist that the standoff in the sector can only be resolved only if New Delhi recalled its troops to their original positions. China has been trying to change this status quo, which resulted in Indian soldiers in coordination with the Bhutan government stopping its road building project in Dokala. India is in continuous talks with China both in Delhi and Beijing to establish status quo that existed before 16 June 2017. India has referred to a flag meeting between Indian and Chinese forces on 20th June on the issue, calling the present activities of China near the border a cause of concern. New Delhi said China can't change the situation at the tri-junction between India, China and Bhutan unilaterally. China had, however, said that no meaningful dialogue will be possible till India withdraws its troops from the disputed positions. In retaliation, it also refused to allow Indian pilgrims to go through Nathula to Kailash Mansarovar. Well, here's a roundup now of the other news from across the country and nationwide. An Assam Rifles Jawan was martyred while another was injured in a bomb blast triggered by militants in Ukhrul district of Manipur. The IED was planted at the 27 Assam Rifle security checkpost at Ramwa under the Shangshak police station. Security forces cordoned off the area. The BSE Sensex and Nifty erased early losses and ended higher today. The BSE index ended 64.09 points or 0.21% higher at 30,921.61, while the NSE index closed up 16.8 points or 0.18% at 9,520.90. The stock movements come ahead of the rollout of the GST, which is expected to benefit some consumer goods firms while offsetting declines in sectors like autos that would be hit. The annual Yatra to the holy shrine of Amarnath resumed from Pahalgam and Baltal routes after the weather improved. Heavy rainfall around 3,880 meters in height rendered the track slippery at some places, leading to suspension of the Yatra. The Jammu-Srinagar National Highway was also blocked due to landslides. Indigo expressed interest to buy a stake in the national carrier Air India Limited. It gave a boost to the government's plan to sell the unprofitable company saddled with almost $8 billion of debt. The interest came just a day after the Union Cabinet gave its nod for Air India's disinvestment. But Indigo has said that it is not profitable. If it is not profitable, it will not embark on the journey. Well, it's time for a short break now, but news and updates will continue on the other side. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
I think they're ready to surrender.
आईएनए की बागी फौजियों पर अंग्रेज देशद्रोह का मुकदमा चलाएंगे।
उन तीनों के बचने के चांसेस कम हैं।
ये कोई आम केस नहीं, कोर्ट मार्शल है।
बोला भाई ये केस आप कांग्रेस के लिए नहीं सुभाष बोस के लिए लड़ी।
Lieutenant Gulbaksh Singh Dhillon, Captain Shah Nawaz Khan, Captain P.K. Sehgal. Section 41, waging war against the king. You are charged with murder. Do you plead guilty to the charges read out?
ईमानदारी से आजादी के लिए लड़ने वाली अगर कोई फौज है तो उसका नाम है आजाद हिंद फौज।
The safety, honor and welfare of your country comes first, always.
British Indian Army hand you over to the Japanese Imperial Army.
हिंदुस्तान और अंग्रेजों के बीच एक धागा था, वो टूट गया।
इस बार कुछ ऊपर नीचे हुआ तो देश में बवाल मच जाए। अब जनता किसी अंग्रेज को नहीं छोड़ेगी।
रात दिन अपने सीने विच वजदी आजादी दे राग नू बंद कर ला।
अंग्रेजी अफसरों ने साडी हिफाजत नहीं की, तो वो हमारी वफादारी के हकदार किस तरह हो सकते हैं?
आज हिंदुस्तानी फौज के पास अपना असली मकसद है, हिंदुस्तान की आजादी।
तुम मुझे खून दो, मैं तुम्हें आजादी दूंगा।
ये मुकदमा पूरी इंडियन नेशनल आर्मी का है,
क्योंकि हमने वो दिन देखा है जब हमें ऐसा लगा था कि हमने हिंदुस्तान को वाकई आजाद कर दिया।
देश की आजादी की लड़ाई कोर्ट में लड़ी जा रही है और इस वक्त पूरा देश एक साथ तैनात है।
This trial and its judgment shall be remembered throughout history.
Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha television. Well, Iraqi security forces on Thursday recaptured the site of the destroyed Great Mosque of Al-Nuri in Mosul from the so-called Islamic State. The long battle for Mosul is expected to end in the coming days, with the remaining Islamic State fighters holed up in just a handful of neighborhoods of the old city. Here's a report.
شعبنا العزيز يا أبناء محافظة نينوى الأحبة.
The Iraqi Prime Minister declaring the end of the self-styled Caliphate of Terror group, the Islamic State. After Thursday's capture of the historic Al-Nuri Mosque in Mosul, he declared that Iraqi troops will press forward to free more areas.
نينوى الأحبة لقد دقت ساعة الانتصار وابتدأت عمليات تحرير الموصل. أعلن اليوم ابتداء هذه العمليات البطلة لتحريركم من بطش وإرهاب داعش.
Attacks on the Islamic State's former stronghold in Mosul's old city continued on Friday. The remaining terrorists are now bottled up in just a handful of neighborhoods of the old city.
كلفنا بواجب باقتحام المنطقة اللي بها جامع نور مدينة الحدباء، والساعات الصباح الأولى تم اقتحام الجامع منطقة الجامع من عدة محاور. حاليا المنطقة مؤمنة بالكامل، جاري عملية التطهير والتفتيش، وإن شاء الله بالساعات القريبة.
With the battle for Mosul in its final stage, Iraq opened safe corridors for people still trapped under the Islamic State occupation. A field hospital was also set up to treat civilians who escaped from its control.
المدينة القديمة يتواجد بها عدد اللي نتوقع أكثر من 50,000 مواطن موجود، مع المحجوزة من قبل العناصر الإرهابية.
About 9 lakh people fled the battle, mostly taking refuge in camps or with relatives and friends. Those trapped in the city suffered hunger and deprivation as well as death or injury.
يعني انقطع عننا الماء والأكل وماكو خدمات وماكو أي مسؤول بقى بالمستشفى، فاضطرينا يعني نرجع نسعف نفسنا.
A US-led international coalition is providing air and ground support to the offensive, attacking from different directions. The cost of the battle has been enormous. In addition to military casualties, thousands of civilians are estimated to have been killed.
Over the course of these past 2 years, a coalition of more than 60 nations has united to defeat ISIL. We have conducted tens of thousands of precision strikes to support Iraqi operations. We've trained and equipped more than 54,000 Iraqi forces. And we've supported our Iraqi partners as they fought to liberate their country.
Even though the Islamic State will still control territories west and south of the city, the fall of Mosul will in effect mark the end of the caliphate. Its capital in Syria, Raqqa, is also besieged by a US-backed Kurdish-led coalition. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, US-backed forces say that they have fully encircled Islamic State fighters in the Syrian city of Raqqa, the capital of the group's self-proclaimed caliphate. The Syrian Democratic Forces, an alliance of Kurdish and Arab fighters, say that they have now sealed off escape routes to the south. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights Monitoring also confirmed the last route out of the city had now been cut off. It is noteworthy that IS seized Raqqa in early 2014 and established its headquarters there. The SDF has been gradually advancing on the city since November and launched an offensive to take it on the 6th of June. The coalition says that the capture of Raqqa will deliver a decisive blow to the caliphate proclaimed by Islamic State in June 2014. Meanwhile, the UN says at least 173 civilians had been killed in Raqqa this month and that up to 1 lakh people are trapped by the fighting there. Well, after months of bitter legal squabbling, the Trump administration modified travel ban took effect. The new guidelines are designed to avert the chaos of the original rollout, but the rules are likely to spawn a new round of court fights. Under the ban, citizens of the 6 targeted countries will be denied visas unless they can prove a close family relationship or a connection with a school or business in the US.
This is the protection of the nation from foreign terrorist entry into the United States. We all know what that means. Protection of the nation from foreign terrorist entry into the United States. That's big stuff.
After months of winding through the courts, US President Donald Trump's travel ban comes into effect. This after the country's Supreme Court on Monday partially restored the ban. For entry into the United States, applicants now must prove a bona fide relationship with a US person or entity. If a close relationship is not established, one is banned for 90 days if from Libya, Syria, Iran, Somalia, Yemen and Sudan, and 120 days if one is a refugee from any country.
The creation of the terminology of the bona fide relationship has really only spread more across the board to provide uncertainty for people who are the most vulnerable across the world. And right now, the world is watching us. The world is watching the United States of America. And what they are saying is, we thought that that was the country for opportunity and justice for all, but it does not seem that way.
However, the officials say that visas that have already been approved will not be revoked. Authorities have assured that the implementation would be smooth, unlike the turmoil that greeted the original travel ban. US customs officers, lawyers and immigration officials will be at the country's airports to observe the ban's implementation. However, groups like Amnesty International have dispatched monitors to airports to observe whether anyone was being denied entry. Rights group also suggests that more legal battles are to come.
A ban like this really hurts the family structure, especially when the State Department or the government or the Trump administration is now trying to define exactly what a family is. And, I don't really think that the government is really in a position or should be in a position to do so. As you all know, we're the plaintiffs in the IRAP v. Trump case. And come October, we are confident that we will prevail, that we will be able to give that voice to those in need.
On the campaign trail, then-candidate Donald Trump called for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. The original travel ban in January was imposed with no notice in an executive order, putting travelers in limbo. It was later put on hold by the country's lower courts. On Monday, the country's top court restored the ban partially, but we'll hear further arguments in the case.
Voted to legalize gay marriage. Chancellor Angela Merkel did an about-face that freed members of the Conservative Party to vote as per their conscience rather than follow party lines. 393 lawmakers voted to approve the amendment while 226 voted against. On becoming a law, Germany will be among 20 countries where same-sex marriage is legal. China on Friday strongly protested US plans to sell $1.4 billion worth of arms to Taiwan, demanding that the deal be cancelled. The sale would severely damage China's sovereignty and security interests and run counter to Washington's commitment to a one-China policy. China has asked the US to immediately stop the sale to avoid harming relations with Beijing. This was the first US deal with Taiwan since President Donald Trump took charge. Chinese President Xi Jinping inspected more than 3,000 People's Liberation Army troops in Hong Kong. Xi's visit to the Shek Kong barracks of Hong Kong's new territories came on the second day of his first trip as president to the financial hub, where he is marking the 20th anniversary of the city's handover from British to Chinese rule. The garrison includes between 8,000 and 10,000 personnel, including infantry and special forces troops. Former executives of the Tokyo Electric Power Company on Friday pleaded not guilty to charges of professional negligence resulting in injury and death in their first trial over the 2011 Fukushima nuclear plant disaster. The accusations against the former chairman of TEPCO and two former vice presidents of TEPCO were filed by Fukushima residents and anti-nuclear activists who hope the trial will shed more light on the world's worst nuclear disaster. A ruling is not expected until at least next year. Moving on to some sports news now. The third one-day international match between India and West Indies is underway at the Sir Vivian Richards Stadium in Antigua. West Indies won the toss and opted to field first. Put into bat, India made 100 runs, or rather 122 right now, for 3 wickets in little over 26 overs. Ahead of the match, both teams have worked hard to get into best shape. India leads the 5-match series 1-0 after winning the second ODI in Port of Spain by 105 runs. The ODI series is an important one for West Indies as they aimed for direct qualification for the ICC World Cup 2019 in England. Well, that's it on this newscast. Good night.